We can turn now to our business editor, Kate Moody. And Kate, he's had a tough couple of days, hasn't he? Well, maybe the congressmen have had a tougher couple of days. But the investors seem to like it because Facebook shares have gone back up a little bit, haven't they?
They have indeed, after having wiped off about $100 billion from their market value over the last month or so. We did see Facebook shares rising 4.5% after that first round of apologies on Tuesday. That's worth about $20 billion. You can see that Wednesday's session has also been on the positive trend there. Facebook shares up about 1.33% on the NASDAQ this hour, a little bit less of an impact than that first day of testimony. It is clear, though, that the potential regulation and possible changes to Facebook's business model is a real concern for investors. Now, to talk a bit more about that, we can cross to Washington to speak to Eric Reimer, president of the DC strategy firm Nueva Horizons. Thanks for being with us this evening. You've been watching this data privacy crisis closely since it broke last month. Do you think that this is a turning point for Facebook in terms of possible regulation?
I think definitely. I mean, I think over recent years, many policymakers have been content to let Facebook basically regulate itself. I think this past year we've seen increasing concerns over fake news in the platform, the Russian interference efforts, censorship of different political views. And I think the Cambridge Analytica scandal was basically the straw that broke the camel's back. And so I think even though policymakers are still not sure what exact solutions to create, they realize there is a need to do something. Facebook has become, not just Facebook, but social media overall, internet services, Google, Twitter, etc. It becomes so influential nowadays that even a small change in the platform by their owners can dramatically affect elections, political discourse, as well as affect the private user information of the hundreds of millions or billions of people, like in Facebook's case.
Concretely, Eric, what kind of regulations could be on the cards here?
So there's a variety of solutions that are being discussed. They range from, in Europe, for example, data consent laws whereby users have to essentially affirmatively consent to be given their data to the platform. We also include measures such as restricting user data from being used in certain ways, such as for basically not allowing the platform to collect the kind of data. One measure that's gaining increasing consensus is called the honest ads mechanism, whereby political ads on the platform will receive a disclosure just like they receive on television and whatnot, disclose essentially who is funding the ad. Some more heavy solutions include possibly protecting speech and viewpoints on the platform, or making sure at least they're being presented in a unbiased way. And so we see Democrats, Republicans, as well as many other legislators are considering that because of how influential Facebook can be, and simply like placing one story above the other in affecting elections. And the most extreme side, there's also antitrust solutions, which will be very difficult to implement because people could argue that social media is inherently a natural monopoly, and it will be very tough to implement such a measure. And so I think, however, the increasing consensus is that even though there's many differing beliefs on what possible policy solutions there are, people believe that something needs to be done because tech has grown so much in recent years. I mean, Facebook's now a $500 billion company. Google is, $800 billion, Twitter, et cetera. And so I think people realize that tech now is not a new industry and now is reaching the stage where we should put at least some ground rules in place to an industry that has largely been unregulated as of far.
Do you think that lawmakers have been asking the right questions over these 2 days of hearings?
I mean, I think many of them have been very poignant. Certainly, it's a very complex subject, and they have to balance essentially a lot of different concerns. I mean, there's just so much to tech regulation, ranging from privacy to viewpoints to data use and whatnot. And I mean, I think that the core of what they're getting to is essentially how social media interacts with society at large. Nowadays, social media simply affects everybody. I mean, it has such a big role in business. So many billions of users for Facebook and other platforms, and people's data is really, becoming an integral part of this. And I mean, there's data and also the political aspects of, affecting social discourse. And so I think they're trying to figure out what is the general social place of social media, essentially. And I think it's definitely going to be a subject that will require much more discussion and analysis and input from policymakers, stakeholders such as the industry itself, as well as the public at large. And so we'll just see exactly what comes out of this. But I think we are beginning to see at least some people then begin to consider some ground rules for social media.
All right, Eric Reimer, thanks so much for joining us here on France 24.
Thanks so much.
Let's move on to the rest of the day's trading action now. We saw strong rises earlier in this week, but they have now been tempered on Wall Street by growing diplomatic tensions over Syria. The major indices all turning downwards this hour. The Dow Jones down about 1%. Minutes from the latest meeting of the U.S. Federal Reserve warned that economic growth could be negatively affected by the risk of a trade war. The major European indices also closed down. The French